Hi, my name is Megan Hansen. It's nice to meet all of you. This is for EDL852, School Law, Module 1. Just a little personal information about myself. I am Ohio born and raised. I've been married to my husband Brian for 9 years. We have 2 children, which you can see up here. This is Vivian, who will be turning 4 next month, and this is Callan, who just turned 2. We just got a new dog, Sky. We adopted her. This is my 12th year teaching. My undergrad is in integrated social studies from John Carroll University. My master's degree is from Notre Dame College. I'm certified to be an intervention specialist, mild to moderate, K through 12. I'm currently employed at a high school where I created a learning resource center where there's myself, 2 other intervention specialists, and a professional aide where we work with students on study skills, organizational skills, make sure they don't have any missing assignments. It's been a pretty good success the last 4 years. It's one of the things I'm probably most proud of in my career recently. And then I've also spent a year as an assistant athletic director. And since I have been in the high school setting, this is my 7th year as an assistant faculty manager. So I still get to work in the athletic realm as well as the teaching, which is pretty exciting for me. So just transitioning from a little bit of my personal life over to my professional. For this class, we had to do looking at just various articles and talking about the differences of the federal, state, and local government and their impact that they have on education. So the first thing that we looked at was about the federal government, which is run by the U.S. Department of Education. We have the Secretary of Education. However, ever since the Every Student Succeeds Act, that drastically reduced the federal government's role. So based off of the articles, there are 4 main focal points that the federal government has over education. So they do the enforcement and discrimination laws. So they basically just make sure that every single child in the country has access to a free and appropriate education. It doesn't matter about their socioeconomic status. Every student deserves to receive an education. The other one is just some policies related to the funding. So they have kind of incentives for states or local governments to meet as a way to help students, but it's more on the state and local governments to show how they're meeting that, and then they provide the funding to those districts or state. They also do a lot of data collection and research, and they provide that information to the state and local governments just on different ways of closing the learning gaps, trying to create policies to help meet specific individual goals and needs for those districts. And then lastly, they try and look at problems that they see across the nation, just on that level. So they try and find ways to help the state and local act sooner and be more proactive instead of reactive. And then we transfer over to the state government. So that is typically run by the State Department of Education. There's the governor, it could be a state legislator, a state school board. It varies from states. Their big thing is they set the budget and determine the budget for educational funding, which is the largest line item in the budget, which is something that I had just learned. They also are responsible for setting and creating state standards, curriculums, policies, laws, assessments. So just something interesting, Ohio just implemented the dyslexia certification. So every single intervention specialist from K through 12 will have to take this certification training. So right now, this school year, they focused on K through 3. And then next year, I think it goes 4 through 6. And so then by 2026, everybody K through 12 will have this certification. However, it's up to the local school districts how they want to go about having those teachers take the course. The state government's also in charge of licensing and evaluating all teachers. So I just recently had to renew my teaching license. So I had to do coursework, and all of that stuff is set up through the state government, and you submit it through their system and database, and they make sure that you are all squared away. They also oversee special services for students with disabilities, and they provide funding. What's interesting is I didn't realize how much money that we were receiving, like just from the COVID era. So when we were starting to dive in this a little bit more, and I was talking to administrators, everybody's like, we don't have that COVID money anymore. So some of the things that we did have the last couple of years, we no longer have in the building just because that funding ran out, and it was because of COVID that they kind of created special things for us to use for funding purposes. But now that everybody's back, like mainstream in the classroom, there's no more hybrid or online. That has gone away. And then lastly, we have the local government. So these are your Board of Education members, your elected officials, which one of the articles pointed out that some cities actually allow the mayor to appoint the officials. I think it was in Chicago. So it was actually kind of interesting for me. And so I just had a couple of thoughts and questions like, is that really beneficial or is it more political? What if you don't have, somebody who's vested in the schools? Is it more of a business model instead of like geared for educational purposes? Just those are kind of my thoughts that I wanted to share. They develop school policies and all the bylaws. They technically employ the superintendent and the treasurer. So just through the research, I learned that the superintendent does not respond to the treasurer. Like they're two separate entities and they're on the same playing field, which is kind of cool. I didn't know that. They also are responsible for negotiating collective bargaining agreements. They create all of the policies on safety and discipline, athletic eligibility, which is also something that I focus a lot about. They determine the hiring process and policies. They have their annual board meetings where they have to post minutes and listen to ideas, concerns, and complaints, and kind of funnel all those things in that are very specific to their district and try and create the best framework possible for then the schools to function and district to succeed in. So just taking a look at my school district. So we are the second largest school district in Summit County. So we have, the bylaws were very overwhelming when I was looking at them. But we do have a lot of things in place. So to promote the current and future success and well-being of each student and adult. The first one I wanted to put on there is student mental health and suicide prevention. I'm very proud of this initiative that we just started in the athletic department. 2 years ago, I spearheaded the Mental Health General Index, where student athletes answered 8 yes or no questions that we took from the NCAA. And they basically rank kids on different levels, and it just gauges their mental well-being. And depending on the responses, I send them to their school counselors who check in with them. We follow up with parents because we really want to start focusing on the entire child, especially in this post-COVID era. So that was really cool, and it was actually fun to see it in our board policies. There's also talks on there just about, how to care for students with chronic health conditions, if students, use of tobacco, and there's educational programming and follow through with that. So it's not just like a suspension from school. They also can take like an immersion program to kind of help them just get back on track and find like different coping skills and strategies. We have over 100 policies just about our students. And then for adults in the district, we have to complete something called Public School Works, which is a board policy. We have the Employee Assistance Program. So that is something that they've really been pushing since COVID, of just figuring out ways to support us as educators, like if we are having, mental health issues or if there's substance abuse going on. And then we also talk about leave of absences, sick leave, active duty, FMLA. And then I found this interesting. We're allowed to take like a 2-year sabbatical leave as long as we do it within like a year of turning it into the board for approval. The main purpose for the Board of Education is that they create the policies, and then the administration is to implement those policies in each of the building. The superintendent kind of acts as the liaison between those. And then we have our citizens who vote on levy issues, bond issues, just ways to help improve our school district. And we constantly are trying to improve communication with the public. I know from the athletic perspective, we've taken a much stronger stance on social media and just getting that information out there. And now as an educator, we've been using Google Voice just as a quicker, easier way for us to access parents and from parents to access us. We did recently go one-to-one, so the district provides every student a Chromebook starting in kindergarten, and then they get a new one every 5 years. We do have like an operations plan. We talk about school safety and ALICE training. This was interesting that they actually had to put in a pandemics and emergency from the COVID era. So we recently, our board adopted a new strategic plan, which runs from until 2026. It just includes like the portrait of a bulldog, our missions, how we're improving our district, and then those are the ways that they're doing them, just through curriculum, continuous improvement, human resources, like infrastructure. We have a lot of old buildings, finances, technology, public relations, staff and student wellness, diversity and inclusion, fine arts, and athletics. My personal experiences, so with the federal government, I don't have a direct personal experience with them, other than I have to provide children with a free and appropriate education, regardless of disability, and being an intervention specialist, I write IEPs all the time, which are federal legal binding documents, and they transfer from state to state. As far as the state goes, I fall under the new state policy, as I talked about earlier, about obtaining dyslexia training by 2026. I also have to follow all the new licensure renewal processes, and then meet all of the requirements and continue to do professional development. Local, so under that state required dyslexia training, I'm gonna have to do that, I think, within the next 2 years. Every 5 years, I have to create a new IPDIPI goal through my LPDC, which I just had to do because I just received a new state licensure. And then just some correlation, relevance, and reflection. I was able to research the various levels of government and the involvement each has with the funding and policy making that impacts the student in the country. I'd explain their specific roles and how the officials are elected or appointed. This is relevant because it made me take a deeper look at how the education system is structured and the checks and balances that are in it, and how each level has a specific role within the system. And as I look back on this assignment, I did not have a full understanding of the impact of each branch on the education system. In undergrad and grad school, I don't actually recall a class focusing so deeply on the how of education, meaning like how does it work, who had control, who supersedes whom. So as a future building leader, like I'll be able to take this research with my district and help them better meet the needs and goals. And then these are my references. Thanks.